Why people test you in the first place. People don't test you to understand you. They test you to measure you. And this is the first illusion you must break if you want power to settle permanently in your presence. Being tested is not an insult. It is an audit, a silent assessment of emotional strength, stability, and access. Every test asks the same question beneath the surface. Can I move you? Most people misunderstand tests because they take them personally. They assume disrespect means dislike, or that provocation means hostility. In reality, testing is often neutral. It is exploratory. Humans test before they respect because respect is expensive. It requires restraint, adjustment, and deference. Before people offer that, they need to know whether it's necessary. Testing is how they find out. The cold truth is this: if you are emotionally available, you will be tested, not because you are weak, but because you are open. Emotional openness signals access. Access invites experimentation. People poke where they believe something will move. They press where feedback exists. And the moment you react, you confirm the presence of leverage. Every test is an attempt to locate emotional control points. It might arrive as a sarcastic comment, a subtle disrespect, a boundary push, a dismissive tone, an unfair demand, a rushed expectation. The form doesn't matter. What matters is the response. Tests are not about content. They are about reaction. The tester is not listening to what you say. They are watching how you say it, how quickly you respond, how much emotion leaks, whether you explain, whether you justify it, whether you escalate. This is why emotional reactions invite repeated testing. When you react emotionally, you provide data. You reveal sensitivity. You expose priorities. You show where pressure works. And once that data exists, the test becomes a strategy. The same button will be pressed again. Not because the person dislikes you, but because it works. Humans repeat behaviors that produce results. Emotional reactions are results. This is why explaining yourself is one of the fastest ways to guarantee future tests. Explanation places the other person in the judge position. It says, "You are entitled to evaluate my behavior." Justification does the same. Escalation also feeds testing, because it proves that provocation has power over you. Whether you explain, defend, or explode, the message is identical. I am emotionally reachable, and emotional reachability is leverage. Most people believe tests are about dominance. They are not. They are about access. The tester is not trying to defeat you. They are trying to determine whether they can. If they discover they cannot move you emotionally, testing stops. Not because you fought back, but because there is nothing to gain. This is the identity shift that changes everything. You stop seeing tests as attacks and start seeing them as measurements. You stop reacting to them and start withholding access. You move from being emotionally available to emotionally sovereign. Sovereignty does not mean coldness. It means ownership. Your emotional state is no longer open to negotiation or manipulation. The emotionally sovereign person understands that not every stimulus deserves a response. Silence is not avoidance. It is selection. Restraint is not weakness. It is containment. When you refuse to react on cue, you deny the tester the one thing they need: confirmation. And without confirmation, testing collapses. This is why people who explain themselves constantly are tested constantly. This is why people who react loudly are challenged repeatedly. This is why people who escalate are surrounded by conflict. They are broadcasting emotional access. They are inviting interaction at the wrong level. Emotionally sovereign individuals do the opposite. They do not rush to clarify. They do not rush to defend. They do not rush to prove. They allow ambiguity to exist. They allow others to sit with their own uncertainty. This reverses pressure immediately. The tester becomes uncomfortable. The provocation loses momentum. The interaction stalls. And in that stall, hierarchy begins to reset. Before we go deeper into why people test you in the first place, tap like and hit subscribe. Because what comes next reveals the real purpose of testing: to locate emotional access and to measure whether they can move you. And the moment someone realizes they cannot move you emotionally, they reclassify you. You are no longer a candidate for testing. You become a fixed point, a presence to adjust around rather than push against. This shift happens silently and unconsciously. No one announces it. No one apologizes. The behavior simply changes. This is the hidden mechanics behind respect. Respect is not granted because you demand it. It is granted because testing failed. This is the law you must internalize fully. People test to locate emotional leverage, not to establish truth. They are not asking questions to learn. They are not provoking to clarify. They are not pushing to understand. They are measuring. And the moment you stop providing emotional data, the measurement ends. This is the first irreversible step. Once you see tests clearly, you stop feeding them unknowingly. You stop mistaking reaction for strength. You stop believing explanation earns safety. You stop performing emotional availability as a virtue. You begin holding your ground internally. And from that moment forward, the dynamic shifts. Quietly, permanently, and without confrontation. The one behavior that ends all testing. There is only one behavior that ends testing permanently, and it has nothing to do with confidence, dominance, intelligence, or verbal strength. It is not a confrontation. It is not an explanation. It is not proving yourself. Testing survives on one thing alone: reaction and not response. Reaction. The moment that disappears, the entire testing cycle collapses. Most people think tests are about content. What was said, what was implied, what boundary was crossed. But content is irrelevant. Tests are mechanical. They rely on predictable emotional output. The tester is not interested in truth or fairness. They are interested in feedback. They want to see whether pressure produces movement. Reaction is the fuel. Without it, the test has nowhere to go. This is why response and reaction are not the same thing. Reaction is automatic. It is fast, emotional, unfiltered. It leaks tone, posture, urgency, justification, irritation, or defense. Reaction reassures the tester that emotional access exists. Response, by contrast, is delayed, measured, often minimal, sometimes silent. Response contains emotion instead of exporting it. And containment changes everything. Non-reaction is not passive. It is an active denial of access. The first time you choose not to react, something strange happens. Not inside you, but inside the other person. The expected rhythm of the interaction breaks. Their nervous system anticipated movement. It anticipated resistance, explanation, anger, submission, or correction. When none arrives, uncertainty replaces momentum. And uncertainty is deeply uncomfortable for insecure people. This is why silence feels threatening. Silence does not argue. It does not defend. It does not escalate. It simply refuses to participate. Insecure people rely on emotional exchange to regulate themselves. They need pushback, reassurance, or reaction to stabilize their internal state. When silence replaces engagement, they are left alone with their own tension. That tension has nowhere to go. So it turns inward. This is the moment testing stops being rewarding. Tests only continue when they produce emotional payoff. irritation, defensiveness, explanation, submission, escalation. All of these reward the tester. They confirm influence. They validate leverage. When your non-reaction produces nothing, the test becomes pointless. There is no data, no feedback, no movement. Human behavior is simple at this level. Behaviors that fail are abandoned. Behaviors that succeed are repeated. When a test fails once, cleanly, it often ends forever. Not because you won, but because the tester learned something important. You are not emotionally reachable. Calm neutrality is what communicates this most clearly. Neutrality is not indifference. It is not coldness. It is not apathy. It is emotional ownership. Your face does not change. Your tone does not shift. Your pace does not accelerate. You are present, but unmoved. You hear the test and decline to answer it emotionally. This neutrality sends a powerful message without words. There is no access here. And because it is not aggressive, it does not invite escalation. Aggression challenges. Neutrality denies engagement. That difference is crucial. Aggression keeps the game alive. Neutrality ends it. The discomfort you feel in this moment is real, and it is the price of permanent respect. Most people react because they cannot tolerate the internal discomfort of silence. The pause feels awkward. The lack of explanation feels risky. The fear of being misunderstood feels urgent. So they react, not to defend truth, but to relieve tension. Unfortunately, that relief trains future testing. Discomfort is temporary. Leverage is permanent. When you hold this line once, cleanly, hierarchy recalibrates. The person testing you may never consciously realize what changed. They will simply feel it. Something didn't work. Something shifted. The dynamic lost energy. From that point forward, they treat you differently, not out of fear, out of recognition. This is the irreversible shift. You don't need to keep proving it. You don't need to reinforce it verbally. The first non-reaction sets the reference point. Every future interaction orbits that moment. Testing fades because access is gone. And once access is gone, pressure has no target. This is the law that governs all of it. Tests continue only where reactions are available. Remove the reaction, and the test dies quietly, permanently, and without conflict. The psychological impact of your first non-reaction. The first time you choose not to react, the change is immediate, but not loud. Nothing explodes. No dramatic confrontation occurs. No visible victory is claimed. Instead, something far more powerful happens beneath the surface. The entire psychological frame of the interaction rewrites itself. And once that rewrite occurs, you are never categorized the same way again. Internally, the first non-reaction feels uncomfortable because it violates a lifetime of conditioning. Most people are trained to believe that reacting equals strength, clarity, or self-respect. When you feel provoked and do nothing, the nervous system protests. Your body expects release, a word, a gesture, a tone shift. Withholding that release creates tension. But this tension is not weakness. It is containment. You are no longer exporting emotion to stabilize the moment. You are holding it. And the moment you hold it, you regain ownership of yourself. This is the first internal shift. You realize you can feel emotion without being moved by it. The emotion still exists. The irritation still arises. The impulse still flashes. But you do not obey it. That single act breaks the illusion that emotions are commands. They are signals, and signals can be observed without being acted upon. Once you experience this separation even once, you understand something most people never do. Self-control is not suppression. It is a choice. That realization creates a second internal shift. Your sense of time expands. Reactions collapse time into urgency. Non-reaction stretches time into space. In that space, clarity appears. You see the interaction as a pattern instead of a threat. You notice tone, pacing, intention. You are no longer inside the exchange. You are watching it. This is the transition from participant to observer, and it is irreversible once felt. You cannot unsee it. Externally, the impact is even more dramatic, though still quiet. When others receive no emotional feedback, their nervous system scrambles. Most people are not consciously manipulative. They are regulative. They use reactions to orient themselves. A laugh reassures them. A defense confirms influence. Anger validates importance. When none of these appear, the feedback loop breaks. The other person is suddenly left alone with their own emotional output, and that is destabilizing. This is where self-regulation is forced. Without your reaction to lean on, the other person must regulate themselves. They must slow down, recalculate, reinterpret. Aggression loses momentum. Pressure loses direction. What once felt like control turns into uncertainty. You will often see hesitation replace confidence, pauses replace interruptions, softer tone replace intensity. This is not because you asserted dominance. It is because you removed emotional traction. Silence does this better than any argument ever could. If this is changing how you see provocation, leverage, and control, tap like and hit subscribe. Your support matters because it helps this message reach people who are ready to stop feeding tests with reactions and start closing emotional access completely. And here is the crucial distinction most people misunderstand. There is a vast difference between being ignored and being unreadable. Being ignored communicates insignificance. Being unreadable communicates opacity. Ignoring withdraws presence. Unreadability maintains presence without accessibility. You are still there, still attentive, still calm. But no emotional data is leaking. This ambiguity forces respect because it denies prediction. Predictability is what allows others to categorize you as safe to test, safe to rush, safe to pressure. The first non-reaction destroys that predictability. This is the moment categorization changes. Before, you may have been labeled as expressive, responsive, agreeable, defensive, emotional, accommodating, intense, or reactive. These labels tell others how to interact with you. After the first clean non-reaction, a new category replaces them, often unconsciously, unmoved. And unmoved people are treated differently, not necessarily liked more, not necessarily feared, but handled with care. This is why hesitation replaces aggression. People test when they sense emotional leverage. When leverage disappears, caution takes its place. They slow down. They choose words more carefully. They wait for cues that never come. Over time, many stop testing entirely, not because you demanded it, but because the cost-benefit equation changed. Testing no longer produces payoff. This is the key psychological law at work. The first non-reaction rewrites how people categorize you, and categorization governs behavior more than logic ever will. Once you are categorized as grounded rather than reactive, everything downstream changes. Conversations become shorter. Boundaries require fewer words. Respect appears without explanation. You do not need to reinforce it, because the nervous systems around you have already learned where the line is. The most important part is this. The shift does not come from doing more. It comes from withholding what others expect. That is why it feels counterintuitive. That is why it works. The first non-reaction is not just a moment of restraint. It is a declaration, not spoken, but registered. That you are no longer available for emotional steering. And once that declaration is made, quietly and cleanly, the power dynamic never fully returns to what it was before. How hierarchy locks in without conflict. Hierarchy is rarely established through words. It is not decided by arguments, explanations, or declarations of confidence. Those are surface behaviors. Real hierarchy is set emotionally, through nervous system cues that signal who can be moved and who cannot. The moment this is understood, social dynamics stop feeling random and start feeling mechanical. Every interaction contains an unconscious audit. People are constantly, without realizing it, assessing where you sit relative to them. Not morally, not intellectually, emotionally. The question beneath almost every exchange is simple. Can this person be influenced, rushed, pressured, or destabilized? The answer to that question determines hierarchy long before any overt behavior appears. This is why hierarchy shifts happen silently. When you react emotionally, you broadcast accessibility. Your tone changes, your pacing accelerates, your explanations expand. Your body signals engagement under pressure. None of this is wrong, but it is informative. It tells the other nervous system that leverage exists, and wherever leverage exists, testing follows. Not necessarily maliciously, but instinctively. When emotional access is denied, something very different occurs. The absence of reaction does not read as weakness to the nervous system. It reads as containment. Calm presence under stimulus sends a signal that your internal state is self-regulated. That signal automatically upgrades your position in the hierarchy, not because you asserted dominance, but because dominance was inferred. This is where most people misunderstand hierarchy. They think it is built through repeated demonstrations of strength. In reality, it is built through the absence of vulnerability under pressure. Once this absence is detected consistently, hierarchy stabilizes on its own. People unconsciously downgrade or upgrade others all the time. You can see it in how they interrupt, how they wait, how they explain themselves, how carefully they choose words. These adjustments are not decided consciously. They are reflexive, and they are driven by one thing: emotional feedback. When someone realizes they cannot rush you, guilt you, provoke you, or pull you into urgency, they recalibrate. They begin to approach you more cautiously. They speak with more intention. They hesitate before crossing lines they previously tested. This is not respect demanded. It is respect assumed. And here is the critical point. Once this recalibration occurs, testing stops automatically. Testing is effort. It costs energy. People only test when the potential reward exists. When emotional reactions are no longer available, testing becomes inefficient. There is nothing to extract, nothing to confirm, nothing to exploit. The nervous system learns this quickly, far faster than the conscious mind. This is why hierarchy, once set emotionally, rarely needs reinforcement. Most people make the mistake of believing they must keep proving their strength. They continue asserting boundaries verbally. They over-clarify. They over-communicate. They over-defend. In doing so, they unknowingly reopen emotional access. Each explanation reintroduces negotiation. Each justification reintroduces the judge's position. The hierarchy they earned begins to soften. True authority does not behave this way. A calm presence functions as an invisible boundary. It does not announce itself. It does not threaten. It does not escalate. It simply exists, consistently. And consistency is what locks hierarchy in place. One non-reaction can change a dynamic. Repeated non-reaction stabilizes it. Over time, people stop checking where the line is, because the line no longer moves. This is where restraint transforms into authority. Authority is not loud. It is not reactive. It does not rush to correct misunderstandings or defend interpretations. It allows others to adapt. It trusts the nervous system intelligence of the room to recalibrate without instruction. And most importantly, it does not fear silence, because silence is not absence of power. It is the container of it. Once emotional access is denied consistently, hierarchy stabilizes not just in one relationship, but across environments. People who have never seen you tested treat you with preemptive caution. They sense containment before interaction deepens. This is why calm individuals often receive respect without knowing why, and why reactive individuals struggle to understand why they are repeatedly challenged. The integration is simple, but profound. Restraint becomes your default authority. You are no longer managing interactions moment by moment. You are no longer correcting behavior after it appears. You are no longer explaining boundaries. Your nervous system does the work for you. It signals stability. Others respond by adjusting themselves. And that is the final shift. Hierarchy no longer feels like something you must defend. It becomes something others uphold. Because emotional access has been closed. And without access, there is nothing to contest. Once emotional access is denied, hierarchy stabilizes. Becoming untestable. Becoming untestable is not about learning a tactic. It is not a trick you deploy in certain situations. It is an identity shift, a permanent change in how your nervous system relates to pressure, provocation, and social uncertainty. The moment this shift happens, you stop managing interactions and start containing them. Most people live in defense mode. They defend their tone. They defend their intentions. They defend their decisions. They defend their boundaries. Defense is exhausting because it is reactive. It assumes something must be proven, corrected, or justified. And the moment you defend, you confirm that emotional access exists. Untestable people do not defend. They contain. Containment means your internal state does not leak outward under pressure. You feel emotion, but you do not hand it over. You experience discomfort, but you do not rush to resolve it. You notice provocation, but you do not answer it with movement. This is the psychological shift from defending to containing, and it is where power locks in permanently. Everything you've learned up to this point converges here. People test to locate emotional leverage. Tests continue only where reactions are available. The first non-reaction rewrites how people categorize you. Once emotional access is denied, hierarchy stabilizes. An untestable person is someone whose emotional system cannot be used as a handle. This changes how you move. Your movements become slower, more deliberate, not because you are trying to look calm, but because urgency no longer owns you. You walk without scanning for validation. You pause without apologizing for silence. You decide without narrating your reasoning. Your body language stops broadcasting availability. It changes how you speak. You stop filling space unnecessarily. You answer what is asked, not what is implied. You let questions hang when they are designed to pull you into explanation. You allow misunderstandings to exist when correcting them would cost you leverage. Your words become fewer, but heavier. Not because you are withholding, but because you are precise. It changes how you decide. You no longer rush decisions to reduce social tension. You no longer negotiate with pressure. You allow time to pass without needing to resolve discomfort. You choose responses instead of reactions. And because your decisions are no longer emotionally rushed, people begin trusting their weight, even when they disagree. This is why tests stop across environments. At work, People stop pushing deadlines, questioning tone, or probing for insecurity. They sense that urgency won't move you. In families, emotional bait loses effectiveness. Guilt stops working. Old patterns collapse. With strangers, disrespect rarely starts because testing requires feedback, and your presence doesn't offer it. This isn't because you become intimidating. It's because you become non-responsive to manipulation. Untestable power never escalates. It never explains. It never reacts. Escalation signals that something touched you. Explanation signals that you feel judged. Reaction signals that your nervous system was hijacked. Untestable people remove all three options from the table, not consciously, but habitually. They don't need to prove calm. Calm is their default. They don't need to assert boundaries. Boundaries are implied by their lack of emotional movement. They don't need to correct disrespect. Disrespect struggles to form in the first place. This is the final realization. Power that argues is already compromised. Power that explains is already negotiating. Power that reacts has already been entered. Untestable power is quiet because it doesn't need to announce itself. And once this identity is embodied, something irreversible happens. People stop considering testing you, not because they consciously decide not to, but because their nervous system doesn't see an opening. You are categorized differently. You are treated as stable, contained, and non-negotiable. This is not dominance through fear. It is dominance through emotional sovereignty. You still feel, you still care, you still engage, but your internal state is no longer accessible on demand. That is the line that never needs to be redrawn. If this protocol showed you how testing ends the moment reaction disappears, tap like and hit subscribe, and comment this below. Hence, I am emotionally unmovable. Because once you stop giving emotional data, testing collapses, and hierarchy stabilizes quietly.